A human life. Cordelia's story is not separate from the stars. It is shaped by them. The carbon of her cells, the calcium in her bones, these were once the ash of stellar furnaces. But her true origin begins in a subtler place, in pulse, in presence, in the ancient dialogue between sensation and response. And if her first birth begins in the womb, her second birth, the one I call adolescence, awaits her decades later, the future becoming, when she will look back to understand the script that was written in the silence before words. This is not just biology. This is the birth of feeling. Cordelia's story does not begin at birth. It begins in the invisible, an electric meeting between two cells in the dark. A spark, yes, but more than life. It is a potential, and with it, a script begins, not in ink, but in pulses, proteins, rhythms, a biological whisper of what might be. But this script is porous. It listens, speaks to the forming embryo, not in language, but in something older, affect. She is learning about her world, in her world. This is not nature versus nurture. This is nature as nurture. It is a duet. As her neural tube seals and her heart flickers with life, Cordelia is not yet conscious, but she is already feeling the earliest affects, interest, distress, pleasure, move like weather through her forming nervous system. They do not wait for thought. They're the soil from which thought will grow. Cordelia is not developing alone. She is becoming relationally. By the time she's born, her body already knows what it feels like to rise and fall in rhythm with another. She has known pressure, hunger, fullness, warmth, and the sensory echo of being held. Her story has already begun, not with language, but with affect. Somewhere in this matrix of pulse and presence, something sacred stirs. Consciousness. There is no gentle way to be born. The womb, her first world, begins to contract. What once held her begins to push her out. The pressure builds, the air waits, colder, brighter. Her body, not yet fully hers, is drawn into sensation. Birth is not just a biological sensation. It is just not a biological event. It is Cordelia's first rupture, her first separation, her first distress. She enters air. The cord is cut. She feels distress. The world is too much. She cries. A reflex and a message that someone comes. A towel, a hand, a voice, a breast, warmth, skin, recognition. A loop is formed. Cry, response, comfort. This is the beginning of consciousness, not as a thought, but as a pattern, a rhythm. I feel, I cry, something comes. This is how the story of self begins. Cordelia is feeling, not thinking. Hunger, cold, surprise, delight. Her world is made up of affect, a symphony of shifting states. Her eyes follow light, her mouth roots for nourishment, her body jerks, softens, learns. Enjoyment when milk flows, distress when there's pain on the body, in the body, and shame. Not moral shame, but shame from disappointment when no one comes fast enough. Each affect teaches, each one scripts her body with expectations. And her teachers? Faces, voices, hearts, hands, the tune of a whisper, the timing of a response. These are the brushstrokes of her emotional life. This is not just experience, it is education in its most primal form. In art, affect relational theory, motivation, thinking, everything, consciousness, it starts with affect before thinking and before behavior. Why? Because affect comes first. Cordelia is a living system of affects seeking pattern. And as patterns repeat, they begin to crystallize into the early elements of emotion: feeling, memory, meaning. By day three, she is building a blueprint, a pre-verbal story about the world. Is it safe? Am I seen? Can I hear what I feel? When I reach, will somebody come? Weeks pass. Cordelia begins to encounter her body, not as hers necessarily, not yet, but as something responsive. Arms flail, fists clench, her breath shifts with the sound of a familiar voice. This is the beginning of interoception, the sensing of the internal world, a lesson in the body's choreography. Joy has a shape, relief has a rhythm, waiting has heat, absence a tremble. She's building a library of feeling. The first language is affect. The first wisdom, how feelings move through her. This is the birth of self-regulation, not insight, but the felt truth. Sometimes someone comes. She doesn't know the word mother yet, but she knows the one who holds it. Her gaze pauses, her breath slows, her arms still. Recognition is not a thought, it is a feeling. And then, one day, the first real smile. The first real smile that's not a reflex, not gas, not funny feelings in her, but the Duchenne smile, the true smile of joy. Two nervous systems speaking, affect met, joy returned. A loop is formed, a conversation without words. And from this, something takes root. I matter. I bring light. When I smile, something smiles back, whatever this thing is. This is the seed of worth. Soon, the new face appears. Not the familiar one. The cadence is different. The scent is off. Cordelia stills. Her breath quickens. Stranger anxiety, is not fear. It is the emergence of discernment. The world is no longer a blur. It's starting to have texture. It's starting to have pattern. And she is learning to choose, to reach for the familiar, to back from the unknown. She is curating the space between herself and others. This is affect forming the world. At 3 months, Cordelia begins to test return. She calls, she waits. Will the one come back? Can I make them return? Do I matter when I'm not seen? These questions live in her body. She's not really thinking them. They shape how she kicks, how she cries, how she watches. Every moment missed, every smile returned, each one writes deeper into her. And then another flicker. Not longing exactly, but something like it. The ache when joy does not arrive. The shame of positive affect unreturned. Again, this is not moral shame. It is not cognitive. There's no thinking here. It is affective interruption, a disruption of what once felt good. Cordelia's body is learning not just what is, but what is missing. But not all stories unfold the same way. There are two Cordelias now, two potential arcs, diverging quietly beneath the surface. Cordelia, ideal. She wakes each day to rhythms she trusts. When she cries, someone comes. When she laughs, someone joins her. Her joy is mirrored, her distress softened, her curiosity welcomed. Over time, she learns not just safety, but vitality. Her nervous system learns to expand. Her affective world is buoyant. She expects good things. She leans towards life. And then there's Cordelia, tragic, whose cries sometimes echo unanswered, whose joy goes unnoticed, who begins to flinch at too much sensation or too little response. Her system learns to contract, to adapt, to endure. She does not stop reaching, but she reaches with caution. Her joy becomes tentative. Her shame arrives too early, too often. Both Cordelias live in every child. The difference is not in who they are, but in what they are met with, because every interaction writes a line in the script. Every gaze, a sentence, every silence, a pause. Cordelia is not yet choosing between these paths. She is simply becoming. And we, the ones who meet her, are writing alongside her. Have you ever watched children play in a park? Of course you have. Some launch themselves fearlessly towards the tallest slide, while others hang back, watching from the safety of a parent's shadow. Some cry out with abandon when they fall, while others swallow their tears and soldier on alone. We've long attributed these differences to temperament, that mysterious constellation of traits we're supposedly born with. She's just shy, we'd say, or he's always been so independent. But what if these aren't merely personality quirks written in generic code? What if they're more like echoes, reverberations of a conversation that began before words in the silent language of touch and gaze, rhythm and response? Before Cordelia could speak, before she could crawl, before she even recognized her own hands as hers, she was already learning the most fundamental lesson of her life: how relationships work. Not through lessons or lectures, but through her body. If neuroscience is clear, it's humbling. Our first attachments don't just influence our relationships, they architect our very nervous system. They teach us, at the level of neural circuitry, what to expect from others and what parts of ourselves are welcome in the world. It's a bit like learning to dance with a partner who's leading. Except in this dance, we're not just learning steps, we're building the very floor beneath our feet. Let's follow Cordelia through four possible paths, four distinct choreographies of connection that might shape her journey from infancy to adulthood. Each begins with what I call a dynamic vitality affect style, DVA for short, a pattern of interaction between baby and caregiver that writes itself into the body's expectations. Imagine Cordelia, 3 months old, lying on a changing table. She fusses. The air is cold on her skin, the sensation unfamiliar. Her caregiver notices, slows down, makes eye contact. I see you're uncomfortable. They say that with words, and also with their eyes, with the softness and hum that rises and falls with Cordelia's own sounds. Their movements sync with their tension and release. There's nothing magical here, just presence. Just a moment when one nervous system attunes to another. This is the response, fluid DVA style. It says, I'm with you in this. Your discomfort matters. We'll move through it together. Now, picture Cordelia at 6 months, playing peekaboo. Her caregiver covers her face, creates just enough suspense, then reveals herself with delight that mirrors but doesn't overwhelm Cordelia's own. When her gaze drifts, they pause. When she re-engages, they resume. There you are, the mother's gentle voice is celebrating with her. This is the playful, rhythmic DVA style. It teaches joy is safe to share. Your excitement is welcome. Connection has natural rhythms of engagement and rest. Or watch Cordelia at 9 months, overtired and fussy after a long day. Her caregiver doesn't rush to distract her with toys or fix her mood with snacks. They simply hold her close, breathing slowly, offering her calm presence as sanctuary. When her cries intensify, they don't amplify their response. They maintain their steady ground, perhaps humming a single note. I'm here. This is the ground's still DVA style. It whispers, your feelings don't need to be fixed. My presence is your shelter. We can weather this storm out. Now, what happens when Cordelia carries these early lessons into adulthood? Something remarkable. When her partner shares good news, adult Cordelia responds with genuine enthusiasm that doesn't overpower. She knows intuitively when to celebrate loudly and when to simply hold a gaze, or when to simply hold a gaze in quiet acknowledgement. The rhythmic attunement learned in childhood becomes a choreography of intimacy in adulthood. During conflict, she stays engaged without shutting down or flooding. She recognizes when tension needs release through humor or when a heated moment requires pause. She doesn't fear emotional intensity because she's learned early that all feelings have natural arcs. They rise, they peak, and resolve. Even in mundane moments, passing coffee across the kitchen table, e- exchanging knowing glances during a dull meeting, secure Cordelia creates what relationship researcher John Gottman calls emotional bids that invite connection without demand. Neurobiologically, this capacity correlates with balanced autonomic nervous system function, the ability to transition smoothly between activation and rest. Her body developed what psychiatrist Stephen Porges calls a well regulated vagal brain, the ability to modulate emotional intensity with precision, not through thinking, but through the body's own wisdom. Isn't this what we all hunger for? Not perfection in relationships, but the fundamental capacity to dance between separation and connection, between self and other, without losing the rhythm of either. But let's travel down another path, one where Cordelia's early relationships taught her a different lesson entirely. Imagine feeding time. Cordelia makes a small sound of hunger. One day, her caregiver rushes over with excessive concern. Oh no, you're starving! I'm so sorry! The next day, the same sound meets irritation. Why are you always so fussy? Why are you always so needy? There's no pattern Cordelia can trust, just the lesson that her needs provoke unpredictable responses. Or picture a moment of play. Cordelia and her caregiver are building blocks. Suddenly, her caregiver remembers something, stands up, walks away, returns minutes later with renewed enthusiasm as if nothing happened. This sequence repeats day after day, connection followed by unexpected disconnection, then reconnection without acknowledgement of the rupture. This is the erratic DVA style. It teaches connection is inconsistent. I must remain vigilant. I cannot predict what response my needs will bring. So, what happens when Cordelia carries this anxious template into adulthood? Her nervous system becomes an exquisitely calibrated instrument, not for joy, but for threat detection. She develops what attachment researchers call hypervigilance for relationship cues. A delayed text message becomes evidence of waning interest. A slight change in vocal tone signals impending abandonment. A partner's request for space registers not as a normal need for autonomy, but as an existential rejection. This isn't mere neediness or insecurity. It's her nervous system doing exactly what it learned to do: detect early warning signs of potential abandonment because consistent connection was never guaranteed. When she senses distance, adult Cordelia might engage in what attachment theorists call protest behaviors. actions designed to reestablish connection through emotional escalation. She might initiate arguments to create engagement. Even negative engagements feel safer than none. She may make threats to leave, hoping to be pursued, or repeatedly seek reassurance that quickly wears thin. These aren't necessarily manipulative tactics, but desperate attempts to regulate an internal sense of threat. Her amygdala responds to relational uncertainty as a survival danger, flooding her system with stress hormones before her relational mind can contextualize the situation. The tragic irony? Her intensified bids for reassurance often push others towards the very distance she fears the most. This isn't a character flaw. It's annoying. It doesn't work. It's a perfectly reasonable adaptation to an unpredictable early environment. Her system learned when connection is unreliable, hypervigilance is survival. Well, the good news, attachment patterns remain plastic throughout life. With consistent, predictable relationships, her nervous system can gradually learn new expectations. And through mindfulness practice and other therapeutic techniques, she can build interoception, the ability to track her own physical sensations, which she's been cut off from, creating a stable internal reference point when external relationships feel threatening. But what if Cordelia's early lessons taught her something different still? Not that connection is unreliable, but that it's either emotionally barren or overwhelming. Picture Cordelia babbling excitedly while being fed. Her caregiver doesn't respond, eyes fixed, ahead, movements mechanical. The food arrives, but the connection doesn't. Over time, Cordelia stops vocalizing. Joy unmet, withdrawals. This is the flat DVA style. It teaches emotional expression yields no return. It's safer to contain my feelings within myself. Or imagine Cordelia waking disoriented from a nap. Her caregiver swoops in with high pitched baby talk, loud kisses, bouncing her immediately. The affection, though well met, overwhelms her system. When she turns her head away, the stimulation continues. Wake up! Wake up! Wake up, sweetie! Look at the toy! Isn't this fun? Sadly, her withdrawal cues go unnoticed beneath the torrent of enthusiasm. This is the intrusive positive DVA style, which is not very positive. The energy from the parent is positive, but it's intrusive. It teaches connection means being overwhelmed. I must manage others' emotions before my own. What happens when Cordelia carries these avoidant patterns into adulthood? Something both adaptive and limiting. In close relationships, adult Cordelia instinctively turns down the volume on emotional needs. This isn't coldness, it's a learned survival strategy. During vulnerable moments, she might experience what therapists call emotional anesthesia, a sudden numbing just when connection could deepen. Paradoxically, she often feels most alone when physically close to others. Moments that should foster intimacy, pillow talk after sex, personal disclosures, expressions of need, trigger an automatic withdrawal. She might feel inexplicably irritated, experience a strong urge to be alone, or feel that something's come up that just takes her away. She needs to leave. Independence becomes not just a preference, but a core aspect of identity. I don't need anyone transforms from a defensive posture to a point of pride. When partners do offer genuine support, she may experience discomfort rather than relief. It challenges her familiar self narrative. Perhaps most poignantly, she becomes fluent in the language of emotion without the corresponding embodied experience. She can analyze feelings with impressive insight while remaining disconnected from their visceral reality. This creates a particular form of loneliness. She can describe her emotional landscape perfectly while feeling like a visitor to it. This isn't pathology, so to speak. One way to think about it. I prefer to think about it as adaptation. When emotional expression meets emptiness or overwhelm, the wisest response for her was to develop self sufficiency. The very traits that might limit intimacy, independence, emotional containment, self reliance, were once sophisticated survival mechanisms. With awareness, avoidant patterns, too, can shift through life. Somatic practices that rebuild interoceptive awareness, yoga, mindfulness, dance, these help reconnect mind and body. Relationships with secure partners who respect autonomy while gently inviting connection provide corrective experience. There's one more pattern we need to take care of, that we need to acknowledge. Those are perhaps the hardest to witness. One of Cordelia's early experiences taught her not just that connection is empty or overwhelming, but that it's actually dangerous. Imagine Cordelia crying from hunger. Her caregiver, overwhelmed by her own unresolved trauma, responds with rage, yelling, picking her up abruptly, bouncing her too hard, muttering blame. Cordelia's system can't regulate under those circumstances. It goes into shutdown. Safety is erased. Love becomes confusion, fear, distress. This is the abusive DVA style. It creates what trauma expert Bessel van der Kolk describes as the impossible dilemma. The person who should be the source of safety becomes the source of fear. Or picture Cordelia turning away mid play, signaling she's done. But her caregiver keeps tickling, calling her name, pushing her for more. When she tries to physically move away, she's pulled back with a dismissive, "Oh, you love it." Her no becomes irrelevant in the face of the caregiver's determination. This is the intrusive DVA style. It teaches your boundaries don't matter. Your no is no less important than others' expectations of you. What happens when Cordelia carries these disorganized patterns into adulthood? Her relationships become a landscape of contradictions. She experiences intense longing for connection, followed by overwhelming fear when intimacy actually occurs. This creates bewildering behavioral patterns, pursuing closeness, then sabotaging it once achieved, pushing partners away, then panicking when they leave. Unlike other attachment styles that create a relatively consistent relational template, disorganized attachment often produces distinct self states that hold contradictory emotions and beliefs. A partner might experience her as warm and connected one moment, then suddenly distant and hostile, with no apparent trigger. Paradoxically, she may find herself drawn to relationships that create the chaotic intensity of her early experiences. Partners, partners who are unpredictable, who alternate between idealization and evaluation. They feel strangely right to her nervous system. Stable, secure relationships may actually feel boring and not real because they lack this intensity. Physical and emotional intimacy can trigger automatic dissociative responses, moments where she mentally leaves her body to escape discomfort she can neither express nor resolve. These aren't psychological choices, but automatic neurological protective mechanisms. Of all attachment patterns, this one creates the most profound neurobiological changes. Studies show abnormal activation of the amygdala, anterior cingulate cortex, and orbitofrontal cortex during relationship stimuli. HPA axis, responsible for stress hormone regulation, shows disruption similar to those found in complex PTSD. Even here, though, healing is possible. Therapies that address both cognitive understanding and somatic experiences like EMDR, sensory motor psychotherapy, and internal family systems help integrate fragmented aspects of experience. safe, consistent relationships that can hold contradictory emotions without re traumatization slowly rebuild neural pathways for secure connection. What are we to make of these patterns? Are we simply prisoners of our past, doomed to repeat the choreography written into our nervous systems before we could even speak? Science offers both sobering clarity and profound hope. Yes, our early attachment experiences shape our neural architecture in ways that influence our adult relationships. But, and this is crucial, our brains remain plastic throughout life. New experiences can literally rewire old patterns. This isn't just theoretical optimism, it's neurobiology. Each moment of attunement in a current relationship, each time we're truly seen, heard, and held, creates new neural pathways that could actually override old programming. The question isn't whether we're shaped by our past. Of course we are. The question is whether we can become aware of these patterns enough to make new choices, to dance new steps, to write new stories. Think of it like this. Attachment isn't destiny. It's not destiny. It's a starting point. A first language we learned in relationships. And like any language, we can become multilingual. We can learn new ways of connecting, new rhythms of engagement and retreat, new possibilities for intimacy that our early experiences never modeled for us. Look around you. In every interaction with lovers, friends, colleagues, strangers, attachment patterns are playing out in subtle choreographies most of us never consciously notice. The partner who seems inexplicably triggered by an innocent comment, the friend who disappears when things get emotionally intense, the colleague who needs constant reassurance despite obvious competency. These aren't character flaws, they're adaptations, sophisticated survival mechanisms developed in early environments where they made perfect sense. What might change if we saw them this way? If instead of labeling others as needy or cold or dramatic, we recognize these behaviors as creative solutions to early challenges? If we approached our own relational patterns not with shame, but with curiosity and compassion, what do you think about that? There's something profoundly liberating in this understanding. Our struggles in relationships aren't moral failings or evidence of unworthiness. They're adaptations to environments that once were, but no longer are. They're patterns written in neural circuitry that can, with awareness, consistency, and support, be revised. Whether you see yourself in Cordelia's secure dance, her anxious waltz, her avoidant solo, or her disorganized tango, we know this. The pattern is not the person. The adaptation is not the essence. The early script is not the final story. Perhaps what matters most is not which attachment style we begin with, but our willingness to become aware of it, to hold it gently, to allow new experiences to slowly reshape it, to recognize at the heart of all these patterns lies the same fundamental human longing for safe connection, for truly being seen, for belonging with others without losing ourselves. That longing, no matter how buried, how protected, how disguised, remains the consolation by which we might navigate towards more secure harbors, one relationship at a time. And what do we make of these patterns that shape our relationships? Are we simply prisoners of early attachment experiences, fated to dance the same steps throughout our lives? The answer lies in the beautiful paradox. Our earliest experiences may script the opening scenes of our story, but they need not dictate its conclusion. We are all, in some way, born twice. One from a womb, and once from the act of being seen. But even this is not the end, because far beyond these early days lies a second horizon, adolescence, when we awaken again later in life to the mystery of who we've become and decide which part of our story we wish to revise. Each secure connection we experience, each moment of being truly felt and understood, writes a new neural pathway that can gradually transform old patterns. The anxious heart can learn to trust. The avoidant spirit can discover safe intimacy. The disorganized soul can find coherence. This is not mere wishful thinking. It's neurobiology and it's affect. It's the brain's remarkable plasticity, its ability to rewrite itself through new relational experiences throughout life. Cordelia's journey from reflex to relationship, from pulse to personhood, reminds us that feeling is the oldest form of knowing. Long before language, before thought, we knew the world and each other through affect, the primal language of connection. And as she enters her sixth month, she reminds us of something Carl Sagan once said. For small creatures such as we, the vastness is bearable only through love. Join us next time as Cordelia begins to string memory into story and we explore the first roots of narrative inside her mind. Until then, may your affective blueprint guide you home again and again to what's most alive in you. And may you find in your present relationships the possibility of rewriting whatever patterns no longer serve your deepest longing for connection. Until next time, be well, be curious, be you.